Ilara had lived in the shadows of Blackthorn Pack for as long as she could remember. She was only 7 years old when a sudden attack in the night took her parents from her. After that, the pack took her in, but not out of love. They needed someone to scrub the floors, wash the linens, and keep the fires burning through the cold nights. So Ilara became those hands. She grew up learning every cold stone of the great pack house, and every unkind word its people could throw at her. By the time she turned 19, Ilara knew her place. She woke before the sun rose, and worked until long after it set. She ate whatever was left over in the kitchens, and slept in a small, narrow room near the back of the house, where the wind slipped through the cracks in the walls. She never complained. Complaining, she had learned, only made things worse. The young alpha of Blackthorn was named Caden. He had taken over the pack after his father passed away, and he ruled with a hard heart and a sharp tongue. To Caden, Ilara was less than a person. She was something that simply existed to serve. In all the years she had lived under his roof, he had never once called her by her name. He only ever called her one thing. "Servant," he would say, without even looking at her. "Bring more wood for the fire." The other members of the pack followed his lead. If the alpha treated her like she was nothing, then they felt free to do the same. They pushed past her in the halls. They left their messes for her to clean. They laughed at her worn clothes and her tired eyes. But the deepest wound had come when Ilara was 18. In the world of wolves, every person hoped to one day find their mate, the one soul chosen for them by fate. When that day came for Ilara, nothing happened. Caden's wolf had felt no pull toward her, no bond, no recognition, and instead of keeping it quiet, Caden had announced it to the entire pack in the great hall. "A wolf like mine," he had said, his voice full of scorn, "would never bond with something so far beneath it." The laughter that filled the hall that day had burned deeper than any cold night ever could. Ilara had stood there with her head down, wishing the floor would open and swallow her whole. What the pack did not know, what Ilara herself could barely believe, was that she carried a secret. Her wolf had never once appeared, not at 18, not ever. In a world that valued strength above all else, being without a wolf made her seem broken, weak, worthless, and so she hid it, because she feared that if the truth came out, they would cast her out completely, and she had nowhere else to go. Yet there was something even Ilara did not fully understand about herself. On the nights when the moon hung full and silver in the sky, something ancient stirred deep beneath her skin. It was a warmth, a whisper, a strange and quiet power that seemed to hide from the light. Whenever she felt it rise, she pushed it back down. Fear had taught her that anything special about her would only be taken away or destroyed, so she kept it buried, the way she kept everything else buried, and she survived. Ilara held on to only a few small things that were truly hers. A pressed flower from her mother, its petals now soft and faded, a thin ribbon that had once been bright, and a promise she whispered to herself each morning before she began her work. "Survive today," she would tell herself, "and tomorrow may be different." Everything changed the season the Alpha King came. His name was Darius, and he ruled over every pack beneath the northern sky. He was a figure spoken of in hushed voices, a leader both feared and respected, whose single word could change the fate of entire territories. For years, a threat had haunted the border packs. Wandering wolves with no home had been causing trouble across the land, and the packs lived in constant worry. Now word had spread that the Alpha King himself would travel to each border pack to bring an end to the danger at last. When Blackthorn heard that Darius would visit, the whole pack burst into a frenzy of preparation. Caden wanted everything to be perfect. He lined up his strongest warriors to show off their power. He ordered the halls cleaned and decorated. He gathered the most beautiful young women of the pack, hoping to make a grand impression on the powerful king. And Ilara was ordered to stay far out of sight. "Remain in the kitchens," Caden told her sharply on the morning of the visit. "Do not let the king see your face. I will not have you embarrass this pack." Ilara only nodded and lowered her eyes. She was used to being hidden away. She told herself it did not matter. She would stay in the kitchen, do her work, and let the important day pass her by like every other day had passed. But fate does not take orders from an alpha. When Alpha King Darius entered the great hall of Blackthorn, Everyone bowed low. He was tall and commanding, and his presence filled the room. Caden stepped forward with a wide smile, ready to present his warriors and his pack. But something strange happened. The moment Darius crossed the threshold, he went completely still. His wolf had caught a scent. It was faint, buried, almost lost beneath the smell of smoke and stone, but it was there, and it was a scent his wolf recognized from the old stories, a scent that had not been sensed in generations. It was the mark of the moon blessed, the rare and sacred few said to carry the favor of the moon goddess herself. Many believed that line had vanished long ago. Darius did not bother with the warriors lined up before him. He did not glance at the beautiful young women or listen to Caden's practiced words. Instead, he began to walk, following the scent that pulled at his wolf like a rope. He moved past the confused warriors, past the whispering crowd, straight toward the small wooden door that led to the kitchens. Caden hurried after him, his smile faltering. "Your Majesty, there is nothing back there but the servants' quarters. Please, allow me to show you the—" But Darius pushed the door open. And there she was. Elara stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, flour dusting her hands, her heart pounding in her chest. She had not expected anyone, least of all the Alpha King, to come through that door. For a long moment, the two of them simply looked at each other. His eyes met hers, and something deep inside her, something she had spent her whole life hiding, finally answered the call. The power she had buried for so long rose up all at once, no longer able to stay hidden from the one soul it had been waiting for. A soft silver light began to glow around her, growing brighter and warmer. And then, for the very first time in 19 years, her wolf awakened. It rose within her, strong and graceful and unmistakably royal, a wolf unlike any Blackthorn had ever seen. The silver glow filled the doorway and spilled into the great hall beyond. The crowd gasped. The Alpha King, ruler of all the packs of the north, slowly lowered himself to one knee before the girl in the flour-dusted apron. The hall fell into stunned silence. Elara could not breathe. She looked around, certain there had been some mistake, certain this could not be meant for her. But Darius rose again, and when he spoke, his voice carried through the entire hall so that every soul could hear. "This is no servant," he said. "Do you not see what stands before you? She carries the blood of the moon blessed, a line thought lost forever. She is sacred. She is the goddess's own chosen." The crowd could only stare. Caden's face had gone pale as snow. He looked at Elara as though he were seeing her for the very first time, and in a way, he was. But Darius was not finished. He turned his gaze fully to Elara, and his voice grew softer, though it lost none of its strength. "And there is more," he said. "My wolf knows the truth beyond any doubt. You are my mate, the one fate chose for me, my equal in every way." He paused, letting the words settle over the silent hall. "You are to be my queen." For a moment, the world seemed to stop turning. Caden's mouth fell open. The girl he had mocked for years, the girl he had starved of every kindness, the girl he had called nothing more than a servant, was the most powerful being to enter his pack in a lifetime, and she was to become queen of the entire north. Darius rose to his full height and turned to face the assembled pack. His expression was calm, but there was iron beneath it. "For years, this woman was treated as though she were worthless," he said. "You will treat her so no longer. She is your queen now, and you will show her the respect she was always owed." Then his eyes found Caden, the Alpha who had spent so long grinding Elara beneath his heel. "You most of all," Darius said quietly. "You who called her a servant and denied her every kindness. Kneel before your queen, now." For a heartbeat, Caden did not move. His pride fought against him, but the weight of the king's gaze was too great, and the truth of what he had done was too clear. Slowly, with his hands trembling, the Alpha of Blackthorn lowered himself to the floor. One by one, the warriors knelt. The young women knelt. The whole hall bowed to the girl who had scrubbed their floors and washed their clothes, and Caden, undone by his own cruelty, bowed the lowest of them all. Elara stood in the center of it, hardly able to believe her own eyes. Every face that had once looked down on her was now bowed before her. The power to change her fate, and theirs, now rested in her hands. Every eye in the hall waited to see what she would do. She could have demanded that Caden be cast out. The old laws would have allowed it. She could have called for punishment against all those who had wronged her. After a lifetime of pain, no one would have blamed her for wanting them to feel even a small part of what she had felt. But Ilara looked at the pack that had broken her, and she made a different choice. She thought of all the mornings she had whispered her promise to herself. She thought of her mother's pressed flower, and the faded ribbon, and the quiet strength that had carried her through every cold and lonely night. She had survived not by becoming hard and cruel, but by holding on to something gentle inside herself. And she would not throw that away now, not even for the sweetness of revenge. "Rise," she said, and though her voice was quiet, it filled the hall. "All of you, rise." They looked up at her, uncertain. "I could ask for punishment," she continued. "I could send you away, but I will not. Not because you have earned my mercy, but because I refuse to become what you were to me." She looked at Caden as she spoke. "Strength was never the same as cruelty. I learned that in the hardest way there is. I will not forget it now." A murmur passed through the hall, one of surprise, and perhaps of shame. Darius watched her with quiet pride shining in his eyes. He reached out and offered her his hand. Ilara looked at it for a moment, this hand that offered her a life she had never dared to dream of. Then she placed her own hand in his and rose to stand beside him, no longer invisible, no longer small. In the years that followed, the North had never known a queen quite like her. Under Ilara's rule beside King Darius, the threat that had haunted the border packs for so long was finally brought to an end, but not in the way anyone had expected. Ilara understood something the others had missed. Many of the wandering wolves who had caused trouble were simply lost, cast out by packs that judged worth only by strength, just as she once had been. Instead of driving them away, she reached out to them. She gave the forgotten a place to belong, and in return, the trouble faded like mist in the morning sun. Blackthorn Pack survived, though it was humbled and changed forever. Caden remained its alpha, but he was no longer the proud and scornful man he had been. The lesson he had learned that day never left him. On the rare occasions when he was called to the royal court, Caden would bow the lowest of anyone in the room. But it was no longer out of fear. It was out of the deep shame of a man who had held a treasure in his hands for years and never once bothered to truly see it. As for Ilara, she never called herself anything grand. When people asked how a servant girl had become the queen of the entire North, she would only smile softly and give the same answer. She was simply someone who had survived, she would say, and who had at last found her way home. And every full moon, when the silver light spilled across the land, she would take out her mother's pressed flower and hold it close, remembering the frightened girl she had once been, and giving thanks that she had never let the coldness of the world put out the small, warm light she had carried inside her all along.